Hey everybody, it's Mandy. Happy Tuesday. Uh Here we go. Woo! Okay. Super here for this. Hi everyone. I hope you're having an amazing Tuesday. Vinny!
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. I know that you dropped your phone and it
Oh,
messed it up. But look, can I just tell you, like, what I'm seeing is really cool, and it actually looks like it would be a cool filter, and it's kind of
right?
like big magic. So I'd say keep it.
I appreciate that so much because you heard, I was like, what the actual fuck? But I'm not available for things not going my way. So we're going to work with it. My friend said the same thing. She was like, it's like you have an aura. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go with that. This is my magical real life filter.
You
Anyway,
just get a permanent filter. Like, I mean, how many people
right?
have that? Not
It's
anyone. No one.
customized.
Hmm.
I'm so happy that you're here. So for everybody watching, this is Vincent Higgenbotham. He is the author of How Witchcraft Saved My Life. This book, if you haven't read it yet, I'm going to be putting up slides and stuff so that you can swipe up and link to the book. This book is amazing. This book is incredible for new and seasoned witches alike. But unlike most books that are good for beginners, this book has soul. So this
Mm.
doesn't only tell you the practical foundations of witchcraft. What it also does is talks about Vinny's experience, Vinny's life experience, and the way that certain experiences in his life have tied into the essential principles that we learn when practicing magic. So thank you so much for being here, Vinny. First of all, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Vincent Higgenbotham. I wrote How Witchcraft Saved My Life, Practical Advice for Transformative Magic, and I've always been a writer. I've been a writer since I was like 8. I knew I wanted to write books and probably movies at some point, fingers crossed. But
Ooh, here for that.
I I've just always been a writer, and so I wrote a book, and I was able to write a book about witchcraft and how it kind of like pertains to my life or the lessons that I learned throughout life that pertain to witchcraft, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah,
like, some of the mundane things that I've gone through really have informed my practice now.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like this book is just so unique. That's like I think that was my favorite thing about it is like in the witch book niche, as we both know, it can be sometimes a lot of like this is how you do this and like this is how you do this and it can be almost like all gloss with no shine kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? And so I felt like this was really good because it also brought an element of like real life to to the craft and how you can use it, because a lot of times when people are just learning, they're kind of thinking like, how can I incorporate this? And this actually kind of really makes these concepts more memorable because you can
Mhm.
tie it on. Like, speaking of movies, I think a movie, like a memoir movie, would be incredible just based on the things that I've read in this book. But like one thing that I really liked about this book is straight off the hop how it talks about magic in real life not being like all circles and rituals. That sometimes this
Mhm.
is something that we call upon in times of trouble. And I just felt very seen when I read that, and I was like, yes, like this is what it's not like. I feel like people have this idea that witchcraft is a lot of aesthetics and things like that, which it can be, but it is really a truly transformative tool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that so like that's a real thing too, because before I really came into it as a witch and was like, okay, this is where I'm at, I would try to practice magic anyway without like calling myself a witch. And like it was always very just money hungry, and that was it. Like all I was after was obtaining like abundance, or not even abundance, but like literal money. So everything was money driven. And then once my magic changed to this transformative aspect of magic where I'm like, all right, well, this is what I need to change about me to get that goal. And
Yeah.
once I was using magic to kind of do that, that's when I started seeing changes that were legitimate and they were like sustaining and my magic was working. And so I think that, you know, when we really identify the magic that does work for us, transformative magic or whatever,
Yeah.
um, it opens us up so much more.
Yeah, and so like one of the things that you talk about in your book, which is vibration and things like that. And so I feel like that was really, and just you talk about gratitude and just
Hmm.
all of those like really basic things where it's like, yeah, you can do a money spell and you can hope for abundance. You could do an abundance bell jar till the cows come home. But ultimately, the things that are going to attract the things that you want, that are going to truly transform your entire life instead of just a couple coins in your pocket for the day, is the
Yeah.
inner work. And so I
Yeah.
love that. So someone had asked about the book title. So it's called How Witchcraft Saved My Life. I am going to be doing like a swipe up and stuff in stories, and I'll probably do a link in my bio as well so that people can access it, because it really is just such a touching and moving book. I did want to ask, so this book, it's quite vulnerable.
Mm.
This is not, see, this is also why I love it. This was not a sugarcoating shit book. Like, this
Mm-mm.
was a real gut wrenching at times. And was that, like, did you find that challenging to be so vulnerable?
So no, actually, like I actually get asked that a lot too, and I should do one of those like real videos where they're like doing that
Yeah,
thing and like do the questions I get asked a lot. But actually, like that question does come up, and I think maybe it sounds weird when I answer this because it wasn't like the vulnerability that I was able to present is just this natural state for me. Like
yeah,
that is my default setting is to be this vulnerable. Like I walk in and I'm like, hey, this is who I am and this is where I'm heading and where I'm coming from, and that's just it. Like I've never been one to hide who I am, and I think that is partly because it's like a survival technique. So
yeah.
like if people know what's going on or where I'm at or who I am, then they already know they're already being trained on how to work with me. Because at the end of the day, like I'm not normal. Like I mean, I'm definitely off in a, a lot of ways, probably. But like helping people work with me makes the world easier for me. So being able to be vulnerable has just always been where I start with everyone. And it was that was the easy part of the book. The hard part of the book was being able to, so like it's hard to teach witchcraft sometimes, you know what I mean?
Oh,
And when you're teaching it to people, it's like, where is my line? Like, do I tell them to do XYZ exactly this way? Or do I give them this like opening to take their intuition where it goes, but then also um, guide them? And so there are like parts of the book where I talk about, you know, like creating spells or rituals, or even just telling people to journal and stuff like that. And when those things happen, it's that is the scariest part because I'm like, am I telling people what to do? Like, I don't want to be this like dictator or like ever come off as this guy who's like, oh, this is the only way to do anything. And I think that that comes across in the book that that's not how I approach magic or people, but I don't ever want to be that. So that's like the hardest part because there is this, I'm an Aries and double Sag. So like I have all this fire and I have this like leadership quality that's like innate and this drive to like get fire and like make things happen. And so sometimes I can come off as being bossy. And so definitely needed to avoid that when writing a book.
yeah. Well, it did not come across that way at all. In fact,
Awesome.
my next question directly pertains to that, which is interesting that you brought that up. So my next question, and this one is like, um, so in the book, I don't want to give away too much of the book because reading it really is like an experience, right? But in the
Yeah.
book, you talked a lot about experiences that you had where um, you felt excluded. for example, like the first time that you realized, you know, the church's stance on homosexuality and things like that. Like there's different points in the book where you actually feel reading it, you're like,
Mhm.
oh man. So I was just curious if those experiences are why you are such a fierce advocate for all magic is valid magic. So if like people don't know you, like Vinny is he's very accepting, and the book is very accepting, and it's very much like there's no right way to witch. And
Yeah.
that's refreshing in
Yeah.
kind of the modern, like TikTok-y weird landscape of where witchcraft can go. So it's super welcome. So I was just, yeah, the question was like, did those experiences of feeling rejected, is that what kind of drove you to be so welcoming and so open of everybody's unique practices?
I mean, I'm sure that there is something to be said about nurture versus nature, in terms of that whole aspect of the acceptance that I give out. But I don't know how much of it is all of the experiences that I've had, or how much of it is like a default setting in me. I think that it's probably both, but I don't. I certainly would not want somebody to ever feel the way that I felt. So I definitely could not say, like, do it this way, because I wouldn't appreciate that if somebody did it to me. So, yeah, I mean, definitely my life experiences feed a large portion of my viewpoint, but I also think that I was born with this viewpoint. I've always been the person who is interested in understanding all the sides.
Yeah.
And I think that having gone through that experience, those experiences allowed me to see all the sides. So it makes it easier to be that person who's like, cool, that must work for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and like it came across that way too, which was really good because I think what more people need to read, because like, you know, if you're like me, you probably hang out in forums and things like that where there's a variety of questions, and occasionally you see the odd thing where you're like, oh my God, that is the worst information to be giving someone. Like, you can't do this if you don't do that. It's like, it doesn't fucking work like that. You don't need to
Yeah.
be, yeah, like you were saying, like dictatory. So yeah, it's really refreshing to see a book that is, so this book, the sections give you homework. So there's things to try,
Mm-hmm.
there's like rituals, there's journal prompt. Like it's actually a very meaty, very useful book. And if you are a person who's just starting out on your basic witch practices, this is kind of like an all-in-one because it's like a workbook and a beginner book,
Mm-hmm.
and it's humanized to like anchor it in. So are you like, is your plan to write more books? I would love
Oh,
to see
yeah.
more.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on my second book now. I'm writing it with a very good friend of mine. Her name is Martha Carabby Capo. Um, She is extraordinary. She's like, I call her 60, but I think she's in her 60s. But like, it's just this really fun experience of writing a book from like these two totally different generations, but seeing how similar our ideas are, or how in line our access or approach to magic is. So that's really fun. So I'm doing that. And then I definitely have at least a third book planned. But I also like, I write fiction. I've written fiction my entire life. I've never managed to write a whole fiction book. Like I'll write like chapters and then I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? I don't know. And I'll just give up. But like now I have this experience of having written a book, and like it's not as hard as it seems. It just takes
Yeah,
like it takes a certain something. Like you have to put out a lot of effort to get it done, but it's not as hard as it seems before you do it. You know what I mean? And then once you do it the first time, it's like you're bit by the bug. So yeah, I absolutely want to put out more books, but I also want to like write shows, and I want to write fiction, and I want to be part of like production that helps the entire witchcraft community in a whole, because I think that there are lots of us out there who, you know, like seek the exposure to bring people closer to like our soul's purpose of what we're here to do and help people like accomplish, right? And so I just think that there's not enough oneness in that. And so I mean, that's what I really want to be a part of, is things that really bring all of the community together. Like I'm really into um, doing the writing and everything, but I'd like to be bigger in formation of community because like I just want everyone to be friends.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh, that's super exciting that you're working on other books. So I did want to talk to you about transformative magic.
Mhm.
I wanted to know, so what are your feelings on transformative magic? Like this book is just so much on how witchcraft can be this thing that can really help us and change us and change who we are in the world and change everybody that we touch from those points forwards when you do that work on yourself. So I just wanted to find out from you, like, what makes you so passionate about transformative magic?
So, I mean, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Before I really called myself a witch, I was very into like trying to get money, like winning the lottery or like finding money on the ground or whatever, like money. That's what I
Yeah.
cared about. And so I would try to perform magic that would do that. And then when I came into witchcraft, I kind of like tried to fall back into that habit and it wasn't efficient. But then like as I started trying to transform myself and the situations around me that in order to help them fit my needs, I
Mhm.
found that it was like super powerful and possible. And so I see magic as this super intentional thing that you definitely have to put a lot of effort into, right? But that effort doesn't just come energetically or sorry, my dog is like playing with me right
No
under the
worries.
camera. Um,
Yeah.
so you're not just putting in the work energetically and with intentions and everything, but you also are doing it in the mundane world. And I think that transformative magic is the most powerful when processed through the mundane world, right? It's like the thing that you can see the most in the mundane world. Like transformative magic is not about getting money or, you know, making someone fall in love with you or anything like that. It's all about helping you change you and your environment. And so when you're working on that, you have so much say in how much of the magic comes into fruition. If you think about it, you know, like with your mundane actions for transformation, you are using transformative magic. So I think that's one of the biggest things that draw me to transformative magic. It's certainly not the only magic I use. Like I'm definitely dynamic in my processes and the things that I do, but um transformative magic is like the number one go-to. Like if I'm doing something multiple times in a month, it's all transformative and possibly very likely all for the same transformation.
Right. And see, that's why, like, I think that's why we got along so well is like I met Meg and I met you, and I was like, oh my God, there's like other wellness witches that are like
Yeah.
so devoted to this work as an act of not only spirituality, but an act of just improving your vibe and the vibe that you're putting out there. So I
Right.
was like, so like jazzed to meet you guys. So jazzed.
I mean, I was pretty jazzed to meet you. Like I remember the first day we talked, I was like, tell me everything about you right now. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And you were like, okay. And it was just like we definitely were on the same wave right away. And then the more I dove into you, I was like, well, this is very similar to what I'm doing. That's awesome. Because I mean, I think that there is a big change in magic in the witch world in that there's a lot more of us attempting to heal and transform and make a difference, not just for ourselves, but as a collective. And
Mhm.
I really like that there are more of us out there who are like in front of people and showing them, hey, we can do this. You know what I mean? And so that's
Yeah.
definitely like my goals too. And I feel like my squad needs to have the same goals as me. So clearly
Right?
that's why I aligned with you. I
You
mean,
know that when you pull people into your reality, you all
yeah.
just kind of up level together. So yeah, it totally works. I did want to just mention, so your book actually talks about a lot a lot of things that people might be really interested in learning about. The clairsenses was one.
Mm.
I actually don't own any witchcraft books that dive into that so much. I do have the Psychic Witch, but
Yeah.
when I yours, I was like, whoa, and so I was like eagerly diving into the activities and everything too,
Awesome.
because it was so interesting. Because I mean, we hear about some of them, for example, like the clairaudience, like that's something that
Mm.
we kind of hear about. But you had some like other ones in there that were like a little less common that I
Yeah.
found. Really interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, like do you mean like the clear sense of taste or smell
Yeah.
or yeah.
Yeah. Like that was when
So
I had not seen that mentioned and I was like, ooh, here for it.
it's a real thing. Like I think all the like I mean, it's my understanding that the clair senses are all connected to your five senses. And because they're extra sensory, but they're like this is how you relate to the world around you. But also like we feel vibes, right? Like that's clearly a sense. And it's probably one of our five senses in a way. So I lump that in as the sixth kind of clear sense, and it's to know or knowing, clair cognizance. And
Yeah.
I find that the most fascinating ones are these like Claire Gustans and Claire Assalians and
Yeah.
Claire Aliens because like they're not as commonly thought of or like Claire Audience doesn't need to just be like you're hearing this disembodied voice. It's like the message that you're pulling out of the radio, and like who doesn't do that? Who doesn't go, okay, if the next song is this, then, and like, or, you're just looking for something and the words on the radio are just like speaking your name. Like,
Yeah.
this is a clear sense. You're connecting to the source in these moments through your five senses. So I think that like A, they're all developable, but B, they're all totally valid. Like my son has this like smell thing and like it can be super creepy sometimes, but like, I mean, he's walked into places and been like, it smells like death in here. And it doesn't. Like, I mean, but he smells death and it's like bad people live there. Or, like he just knows from what he smells. It's weird.
Yeah, well, you said that. I remember reading that in the book that you said that he felt like he could smell death, and they were places that you didn't even want to be there either, just for
Yeah.
bad vibe reasons, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, and it really shows how kids can be so tapped in. You mentioned source, so that was
Yeah.
another thing I appreciated about this book is it talked kind of at length about source,
Hmm.
and I think that that's a really I thought that that was a really great way of kind of explaining it. So do you want to explain a little bit
Yeah.
about like
Yeah.
your idea of source and how it factors into witchcraft?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I think the source is the big picture. If you've ever seen Star Wars, like the force is like the source, right? Like they can make the mitochondria and do whatever, right? But it's like this essence that lives in everything. It's not just like sentient beings, but it's like single cell organisms or like the molecules that hold this wall up behind me or my phone or whatever, right? Sources in all of that because it's the vibration that's causing it to stick, like all of these pieces to stick together. And so when you think about source on this like super microscopic scale, it's in everything. But when you look at it from this like macro cosmic spell, it's beyond comprehension. Like it goes
Mm-hmm.
so much further than anything I as a human could ever understand. So like it encompasses everything like shadow people or your deities or your vibes, like the vibe that you and I have knowing that we align, like that's all source. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that people get really caught up in being like, oh, I'm agnostic or I'm atheist or I and this or that, right? And in witchcraft, it's really great because you can be kind of all of that or any of that and still be practicing witchcraft. It's like totally normal to do that. But then, like, what we're actually tapping into is that source. It's like whatever it is. It maybe isn't God, but universe isn't the right word because it's so much more than just the universe. It
Mm-hmm.
is the universe. Like the universe is part of it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so source just like it makes sense to identify something that everyone can relate to. And so your source of understanding, your source of power, your source of whatever that is so
Mm-hmm.
much easier to term and then identify that like even though your source is A and my source is B, it's actually the same thing. It's the same source, and this is my tap in and that's your tap in. and we're accessing the same thing, whether we're Christian or scientists or anything.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, for me, being somebody who doesn't do deity work and who is
Mm,
like sort of on the lighter side of woo, I definitely dive into the woo
yeah.
for sure. But I'm like, I'm a fence riding woo type of person. And so for me, I really appreciated that because you did specifically talk about how that ties into deities and the interpretation of things that are coming through your senses and stuff. And I was like, I am totally here for that. So the other thing that I wanted to ask, sorry, just one second. I'm looking at my notes, which of course are a little bit scribbled here. So for you, what is your intended takeaway for people who read the book? Like, what is your hope that people come away with by reading this? Like, where were they at when they started, and where would you like them to be at after the end of your journey with them?
So this is like the book that I always wish that I could have read, right? Because um like I am a real big fan of people like Jack Kerouac or Augustine Burroughs or um like people who write about their lives and they're like, this is where I was and this is where I got. And I like that. I love memoir or like autobiographical work because it lets you see that somebody else has gone through something. So what I
Yeah.
really wanted to provide, like the whole point that I wanted to drive home was, hey, I've been in all these places and I'm here now. And you can be in any of these places or completely different places that feel the way that this felt, and you can get past that, and it's possible. And like you might go through some shit where you're trying to kill yourself, because I was definitely like, I write about that in the book about like suicide attempts, and like I went through these things to then get to the other side. And so I'm not saying like attempt suicide to get to the other side, but like you're gonna have these like really low moments and they could go on forever, and like they might continue after you think everything's really great, but you just kind of have to keep pushing forward and continuously examine yourself and how you can help transform the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like to that end, there's a part in the book where, like, again, I don't want to like give too much
You're
out, but
fine.
there's a part in the book where you get a degree while going through some
Yeah. Yeah.
very intense medical issues.
I mean, nah, it was like fine. When I don't mind giving away things because the
Okay.
whole book is this great
It
thing,
was
and
a
you could never give it all away in like 30 minutes. Like,
it was a gut
um,
punch for me when I got to that part. I was like, oh,
oh, maybe I should wait then. Maybe the gut punch is worth it. I don't know. Like,
yeah. That's why I didn't want
yeah,
to say too much. But you went like so. This book chronicles your experience with things like homelessness, with things
yep,
like abuse, with things like
yeah,
drug use, with things like
yep,
living on the street. We haven't said that yet, so
yeah,
some people might not
yeah,
be
yeah,
aware. But
yeah. I definitely talk about like sex trafficking and selling drugs and like just everything that I did to survive, because at the
yeah,
end of the day, I'm a hustler. Like that's why I'm where I am now though too, because I'm a hustler. Like I'll go out and I'll like make what I need to happen. And like maybe I'm just a hustler witch now, and like the way that I'm hustling it is by making transformation. But it's all basically the same approach. Like
yeah,
making magical change in your life is the same approach as like going out at 3 in the morning to sell like tons of drugs so that you can pay your rent. Like it's the same motivations, right? And like, I mean,
yeah,
maybe they're not all for the same reasons and they don't look exactly the same, but like these are the same motivations. It's like this act of survival or, striving to. And I think that that's really what the book explains in a way,
yeah.
with so many of the personal stories, and then being able to see where I was and where I am now.
Yeah, and it's like it's truly impressive, and I think that it really kind of inspires hope, right? Because we can sometimes feel like when we're in these darkest moments, like I briefly lived on the street when I was a teenager, and it was like you think back to those times sometimes, and it's just kind of like for me now, I'm like, who the fuck was that person? Like I feel
Yeah.
stressed out even thinking of that person. You know what I mean? And so it can be
Yeah.
really people can't really it can't be understated just how formative those experiences could be. I just wanted to mention it too, though, because you were saying like, oh, you were looking for trying to manifest abundance and money and things like that. But this isn't like this wasn't a case of a person like sitting in their house like, oh my God, I wish I had a BMW. I didn't have enough. Like these were cases where you were actually trying to survive in
Yeah.
circumstances that were less
Yeah.
than ideal. And so the fact that you were able to take those circumstances and transform them into healing and growing and overcoming some pretty massive obstacles and
Yep.
still pushing through and getting to where you are, do you feel like that was meant to be?
Oh, yeah. So, fuck. Yeah, definitely. I think that it was meant to be. I mean, how could it not, right? If you look at your life now, like I'm 40, and like 20 years ago, I didn't think I'd still be alive at 40, and 10 years ago, I didn't think I would ever stop being a server. So, like, so much changes and happens, and the fact that if I look at everything now as a 40-year-old and I look at when I was 10 and everything that was going on from like 10 to 40, it all makes sense. It all like lines right up. And I'm like, all right, yeah, this is perfect timing. So this is how it was supposed to be. But I also like fully believe in, you know, um, free will. Like I believe that the choices I make led me to where I am. So like if I had taken different paths, it might have like all lined up differently, but that probably would have been meant to be too, if that makes sense.
Right.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It's very similar to the way that I feel about my own situation. So I definitely identify with that. There's one thing that you mentioned in the book, which was, and I'm feeling it lately. I was like, ooh, this is a new mantra. But you had said, persistence overcomes resistance.
Oh, look, listen, it's like tattooed to
Love
me.
it.
Persistence and resistance. Like, I mean, I got these tattoos so that I could always remember that persistence overcomes resistance. There's actually this
Yeah.
person that used to say that to me, and he didn't mean it the way that I take it, because I take it like the harder I push, the better, like the easier it'll be to get through the like ramparts that are in my way. But
Yeah.
like, and I think he took it to this totally different place, but I was like, it became my motto, and I was like, I just stick to it. Like that's why it's tattooed to me, because I'm like, as long as I'm persisting, I'm going to overcome the resistance. And I just think that that's a real explanation for everyone. Like anyone can do that. And I mean, that's not toxic positivity. That's like literal, like you have to
Fact.
persist. Like it is a fact. Like persistence will get you there. And it might not get you there the way that you think it will, or it might not look the way you envision it to when you get there, but it will get you there as long as you're persistent. So, I mean, that's why it's in the book too. I really live by that.
Yeah, and it's actually just such a good motto because it really is. It works for witches, but it works for everybody. And
Everything.
I think like these days it's kind of been we worry too much about being toxically positive, right? That's a thing we
Hmm.
all know of. But I feel like it gets overcorrected in some
Yeah,
ways. Do
of
you know what I mean? Where
course.
it's like
Yeah.
where we kind of tend to sometimes have this attitude where it's kind of enabling people to not take responsibility for the moves they're making, for the choices they're making.
I think that we're in this really interesting time in human interaction where we are figuring things out in a way that we never tried to before. We're like, are you a like what are your pronouns? You know, are you a he, she, they, them? We actively ask these things now. We are like, oh, are you being overly positive? Like, should you really be giving that person that positive, like, oh, don't worry, he'll call you kind of like thing all the time, as opposed to saying, hey, he's just not that into you, right? Like we're learning when it's okay and when it's not. And so we're like breaking all of these social constructs in our world. And with that comes a lot of misunderstanding, because we are babies. We are just little babies in the spectrum of like everything. And we don't know, and we're just figuring out. And it's like, we're like finally understanding, like we're like two now, like as a human species or something. And so like we're in our terrible twos where we're like, we understand rules, but some of us like we still need to break them, and some of us don't understand why this, and we're all like learning it. And so it's just like part of behavioral growth and development, I guess, but on a much larger scale, like on a unit. like a
Yeah.
species scale. So I think that that is like one of those things where like some people are like overcorrecting with toxic positivity or like getting in your face when you're like, oh, this, right? Like
Mhm.
we got to stop that because we just got to be like, all right, well, I see you in your lane and I'm not going to let you crash into me, but I'm also not going to like try to go get into your lane and show you how to drive. Like it's for
Right.
you to figure out how to drive. And like, I'm going to lead you by an example. I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. I'm just going to show you what I'm doing. And if it's working, then it's all the more reason to like follow my lead.
Absolutely. That is so, yes, that is so, so perfect. Um, well, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to go and get back to my kids, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming. I'm going to do, for anyone watching here, I'm going to be putting a link to Vinny's book in my profile. I'm also going to be doing a swipe up in stories. You should definitely check it out. It's a truly wonderful book. And where can people find you, Vinny?
You can literally just follow me on Instagram, Vincent underscore Higgenbotham. That I do everything on Instagram. Like it's my number one spot
Yeah.
to like find out everything that I'm doing. So you know, if like, are people going to be able to watch this after the fact or only the live? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm gonna download it and try and throw it up on YouTube. I'm like way behind on doing that, but it's gonna get done.
No worries. I was just wondering,
Yeah.
like, if people are watching it afterwards, you can always just like reach out to me on Instagram, and I'm like checking it out. Somebody wants to know where I got my degree. The Art Institute of Philadelphia, because I'm just reading that last question there.
I
Um,
think it was what did you get your degree in? It was arts, right?
oh, what did you? Yeah, that is. It's industrial design.
Oh, whoa, that's super
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, it kind of. I don't use it at all. So
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting, and it was super great to talk to you, and I hope everybody has a great night.
yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I hope you have a great night too.
Bye.
Bye.